Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Vistatec Life Sciences in Focus podcast, fascinating conversations with global life sciences experts. I am your host, Maria Mateos, and today we will be talking about clinical trials. And for that, we couldn't think of a better guest than Constanza Kurman Petrozzelli, Connie, as we like to call her. Connie is a medical doctor, and she also has a master's degree in medical pharmaceutical sciences. She has experience working in both CROs and pharmaceutical companies. She has been part of BMS for 5 years. She started in Argentina and then relocated in the US, where she develops multiple activities to increase diverse enrollment to clinical trials in the company. Connie is also passionate about supporting investigators who are interested in Latino patients and other minorities as well. She makes more space for female investigators and scientists, and I appreciate that her role in medical affairs can help with that mission. She lives in Jersey with her husband and their corgi puppy, Bowie. In her free time, she enjoys yoga and pottery classes. She keeps up with Argentinian literature, and she very much enjoys drinking a good mate. Well, you have over a decade of experience in the industry. That's very impressive. So I'm wondering, when you decided to go to med school back in the day, which is a very long career, what were your expectations back then? What drove you into this field? And you may want to clarify what mate is for our audience.
Absolutely. First of all, mate is a drink that I always like to say globally that if you've seen Lionel Messi, if you've seen the World Cup, Copa America, you've seen Lionel Messi with a mate or any of our players. So it's an infusion, just like tea, different sort of flavor. I encourage everyone to try it. Everyone here in the US office has been trying it. So it's been interesting. So it's just this typical Argentinian drink that we hope it becomes global because it's healthy, it's good, and it's a nice social drink to have. Regarding the question about going into medicine, I think my purpose into going into medicine was same as a lot of people. Unfortunately, I had my grandfather getting sick with multiple myeloma back when I was in senior year in high school. So it was almost perfect and non-perfect timing. Sadly, he passed away, but that's where I developed a love for life sciences, and I just realized how much purpose there was. I would say that from starting medical school until getting to pharma and everything that you just described, Mary, my biography, thank you for your kind words. I would say that everything is not linear. So sometimes you start with this purpose of becoming a doctor and being a physician and having patients, and then you end up maybe in pharma or the CRO. But I think the beauty of that is that you still work for patients. So I'm happy to say that I started out to have a purpose and to create a difference for patients. And throughout my career journey, I still try to work every day for patients and try to make my mission towards patients. So that's kind of my purpose, and I'm happy to say that I still maintain it, luckily.
Thanks, Connie, for sharing. It's very interesting to learn how your career has developed along the years. And I'm curious to know about your work with BMS at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So my day job, I am in medical affairs for the US. As you've said, I relocated and I work in the area of myeloid diseases, of myelodysplastic syndromes. So in a day job, being in medical affairs is really creating that medical education, addressing all the educational gaps for the medical community, and really providing answers and strategies that can really educate where the gaps are. And on a side job, working towards diversity and inclusion and just having my purpose there, I'm also the co-lead for the health equity pillar in one of our people, business, and resource groups. We like to call it. It's kind of like the minority groups in BMS. So we have several of them, and they do amazing work. So in my particular case, I work in the OLA group, which is the Organization for Latino Achievement. So, very happy also to have my side job towards working in health equity for Latino patients.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I really want to hear more about it, probably in a minute or two. you have plenty of experience both on the CRO and the sponsor side. And you are now sitting in the US, but you started your career in Argentina. So what are the differences you see in studies conduction, enrollment, and even participation?
Yeah, so there are the differences that are certainly obvious comparing Latin American countries with smaller territories and less funding, whereas in the US, you have a larger territory. You have not just funding, but a lot of people that really have very dedicated roles. So what I like to say is that one of the amazing properties that we have in Latin America is that we wear many hats. We're used to that. And I agree with all of my Latino colleagues here in BMS. Whereas in the US, people become more specialized and you have a role. So you have your research coordinators, you have your recruitment, you have your nurse navigators, which is sometimes the resources that in Latin America I don't necessarily find, which is unfortunate. But the thing about the US is that it's such a large territory and so extends is that sometimes it's a lot of options for patients. And it's kind of trying to, in recruitment, trying to direct the correct clinical trial to the correct patient, and also really empowering patients to be informed about whether, which trial to enroll, what do they want to do, having that educated decision. So it's completely different. But Latin America has its issues, but also I'm starting to find that the US also has things to tackle, which is always great because it's challenges and you want to be challenged and you really want to support it from the pharma side. But with so many options, you really need to find the right patients, and patients need to find the right clinical trial for them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, really. And I'm so glad to see how much involved you are in helping unrepresented populations in clinical trials. And I know you are leading a very impressive initiative with BMS. So I'm sure you want to tell our audience a little bit more about that.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, we're co-leading from the Hola PBRG, and this is an initiative that we set from the beginning for other minority groups. Please steal it. Please borrow it, borrow the format, and really take it to all minorities. What we initiated was this, we call it real workshops, which we gather investigators who are really invested with their Latino populations to really support them in enrolling them in clinical trials. And what do we want to do here? We want to have these investigators to challenge us as a pharma company and to really give them the resources that they need. Because sometimes, we have this quote unquote privileged position that we can help, but we don't know where to start. And we are committed as a company, and a lot of pharma companies, luckily, we're, riding the same wave, sort of like the Olympics analogy. We're riding the same wave towards having that diversity in clinical trials, because that is the representation that really matters for drugs and for treatments to be effective, to really represent the real population and to really also reach populations, right? We want to have access. So what we're doing with these initiatives is we get the investigators that are really passionate, and we really have that sort of round table, and we say, how can we support you? You have the population, you have the clinical trial. What is it that we have to do? Where do we direct our efforts? And where do we really streamline, right? Like, where are we getting caught on? What can we streamline and make it more efficient? And I'm happy to say that not only has this initiative been replicated, we do it in around major congresses in the US. So we've done it at the major US Oncology Congress last year and this year, and also the major Hematology Congress last year. But I'm happy to say that it's also been done for the Asian minority group in the company. And both editions have had executive presence. And what I love about that is that executive presence really shows that the company's committed, that there's commitment, that there's really a compromise that we're doing as a company to get more patients empowered to enroll in the clinical trials and to have that representation in the population.
Wow, you already have the first replication in the Asian community. So here's to many more to come of those. Your work is amazing, Connie. Really, I very much admire everything you do to help minorities have access to clinical trials and boost diversity too. And changing the shift a little bit, but still speaking about minorities, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts regarding the role of women in science? You're a woman in science. And also, what's the role of women as patients?
Yeah, so I really believe that we really need to become advocates. And when we got that position that we can become advocates, and this is a word that I'm slowly learning in the US market. I may not have used it so much in the Argentinian market, but advocacy is such a powerful tool. And becoming advocates for women as patients, from women in the workforce, and for women as investigators. So for women as patients, it's really having women represented in clinical trials, having science, having treatments developed also with women in consideration, not just the male population, and having that equity. For
Yes, couldn't
so
agree more there.
we discussed this prior. That's why Mary's nodding with me, because we discussed this prior. We've shared a bit
Yes.
of literature recommendations. Also for the workforce, to have the workforce of women really represented, and really, they juggle with so much, whether they're mothers in their homes or not, but women juggle with so much that also they need to be comfortable in the workforce. They need to show up as their true selves, and they need to have all the conditions. And then finally, for investigators, I really believe that we need to advocate for them to have every event, in medical affairs, or whatever event that we do in pharma, to really have that equity in representation, and not just male physicians, but to have a equal representation, and to have female investigators really show their work and show how committed they are to what they're doing.
Yes, indeed. And it shouldn't be just a formula of places to fill in. Like there need to be 3 women in the board of directors or whatever. Wow, you have accomplished so much in your career, and not just for yourself. You do a lot for patients, for the clinical trials community. So you're grown now. You have a career developed. But I'm wondering, what would that 20-year-old Connie that started med school would think if she sees you today? And in that sense, what would you tell her and all those young professionals who are starting in the clinical trials field?
So I think it's a twofold advice, 50-50. One of the first half of the advice I would say is to be patient, to really understand the process of everything, and not everything is linear. Myself, I've gotten frustrated so many times that the path had not gone exactly like I wanted to. But leading up to my second advice is that when you bring passion and purpose into what you do, I think that's where the career path really starts aligning. And I always say that, well, I don't consider myself a mentor, but whenever I have discussions with younger people that really want advice, I always say, bring that passion along, bring that passion project, find, the purpose in everything that you do, what really motivates you, and what really even, creates that intensity in you, that urge that you want to do more. And that's where the path will start aligning. But I really think that in medicine in general, in the medical field, I think there are so many roles to play. I don't think it's just about physicians and patients, although I have the most respect for my colleagues in the medical field. I admire them so much, and I've been there myself. But I think that there are so many roles to play in science, and we really need to support each other. We really need to support each other as medical professionals, because patients are waiting, because patients really need us in so many fields. So I think that the road is long, but patience and passion, passion and purpose could really get you far, I think.
Yes, actually, that's the end goal, right? To help those patients and bringing that passion into the table, whatever that is. You have found a very good way of putting that really into the table by creating this group that is your side job, as you had mentioned before, but it's so important and brings so much to the community. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Connie. It's been a pleasure talking to you. So before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
Just firstly, thank you for the opportunity and for the space. But just sharing that, passion, again, passion gets you so far, and also passion and being creative. I'm reading this book, The Creative Act of Being by Rick Rubin, and it's just, science, where science meets passion and meets creativity, we can do so much more. So it's about really thinking outside the box, like so many mentors that I've had here in the US, thinking outside the box and really thinking that there's always more that you can do. There's always, you don't have to limit yourself. I've done that so many times and said, well, you know what, this is impossible, this cannot be made. Sit down, brainstorm. You have always colleagues to support you in the field, and really get creative and think, okay, what can you do? What can you do extra? And who are you not getting, or who are you not reaching, right? Like, who are you missing so that you can also reach minorities? And how could you do it in a creative way that really challenges you? So a lot of a cloud of words there, but it's kind of my final thoughts, I guess.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you so much for your insights. This has been very, very interesting. And thank you to our audience as well. This Life Sciences in Focus podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and other leading platforms, as well as in YouTube, if you prefer to watch it. Please make sure to tune in again next month for Vistatec Life Sciences in Focus, fascinating conversations with global life sciences experts.